Hey, and welcome back to Without a Doubt, the podcast. I'm your host, Mad, a cycle breaker, entrepreneur, and a sprinkle of reality. This podcast is a place where we celebrate living life authentically and organically as ourselves. We're the ones breaking cycles, making waves, and living out the truest versions of ourselves. Welcoming to the show, not only my real life friend now, but she was first my Instagram friend. Introducing my friend Emily. She is a wellness enthusiast. She also loves getting nitty-gritty about mental health and ways to empower yourself. I met her on Instagram at one time. We'll call that version the teal Emily.
Teal girl.
But now I know her as the real Emily. And I don't even know how long we've actually been like friends on Instagram, but we made like a legit coffee date time now. So we FaceTime often. And yeah, you're an empowerment pro. Let's call it that.
Well, thanks. I feel like you are definitely a great hype woman to have around.
True that.
Yeah, it's true that. But yeah, I feel like we've known each other now for a couple of years, which is crazy. Like I remember the first time that we sent voice notes, but like the first time I sent you a voice note, I remember where I was walking my dog. And it was when we lived in our old place. And like I remember it's so crazy. I just remember that moment and it sticks out to me. It's burned in my brain. I was walking my dog. It was summertime. And I was like, Madison, and like wild. And then it just grew from there.
And then I used to tell Kendra, I'm like, I'm messaging the empowered girl on Instagram. The empowered account.
Teal girl. Yeah. Because I used to never show my face. And I was like, I will never show my face on Instagram. Like, I'm never like, that's not gonna be me and blah, blah, blah. And then like I got to a point finally that was like, if I want to do this, I better just like buckle up and do this. Like, and then it all came like video vomit out of me. So
but okay, we're gonna talk about the video vomit. I feel like this is exactly what our episode is all about, like intuition versus ego.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think you didn't want to put your face on Instagram for so long because you let your ego get in the way.
Yeah.
And within like the last year, you kind of let your intuition kind of take over.
Yeah.
And you're like, screw it. I'm gonna get on, show my face, be myself, and show out to the world. And I think that's really that's actually, I think, the first time like I wrote to you because it was like a teal box. And then one day you just put on your stories like a picture of yourself. And I'm like, oh my God, this is what you look like?
Yeah.
It was like more along those lines. And I think like for so long we hold ourselves back from things like posting ourselves on social media because you're afraid, the fear, your ego, all of the stuff you start thinking like, no one's going to like my content or who's going to listen to me.
Right.
Versus I actually have something to share. I feel like this needs to be shared.
Yeah.
But we don't do it.
Right.
What do you think?
Absolutely agree.
What was the turning point though?
For me to put so it's interesting you bring that up because I remember now I didn't even put my face on my stories.
No.
Like nothing. Like because I was like, I'm gonna build this page and it's gonna be about wellness and like and I'm not gonna put myself on there. And I remember when I put you are right. Wow. I was thinking back to just when I put my face on like my actual feed. But can you repeat the question? Actually, I'm sorry.
What do you think was like the turning point for you? Like when you were like, you know what? I'm not going to be teal Emily. I'm going to be the real Emily. And I'm going to like, what was the flip?
I think it was just the part of me inside that was just like, I can't explain it. It's intuition. It's like the part of me inside that was like, you got to get your voice out there. Like you got to like connect with people and talk to people and be like, not afraid. And it was like, at that point, I was really focused more on like wellness and like healthy recipes and exercises and like different and like healthy sleep habits and stuff like that. But I really wanted to move into the empowerment route. Like my account says empowered in it. Like, and I'm like, I was holding back on that part. And then I was like, F it. Like, I'm just gonna do it. And then I just started slowly and people really started to like I was connecting with people. I felt like with your account, I felt like I knew you because you were always like putting your face out there and talking. And I was like, I feel like I know her and I know we message, but like, I don't know how she feels about me because how would I feel about a faceless account?
True.
So when I started putting my face out there, I realized people were connecting with me more. And I was like, oh, okay, like this makes sense. And so from then I just started doing more and more. I think it was also like I was nervous about because it's a public account, like putting too much of my personal life on there. Like, what if someone comes and finds where you live or like silly stuff like that? But
I mean, that's also ego talking. Like, what if somebody
yeah,
finds me, And I think we talked about this recently, actually, because I usually tag my location on my posts, or
yeah,
I'll share like I'm in Fort Lauderdale because I'm like, this is a very, very big, like South Florida is huge. But
yeah,
I mean, if you're from here, the places I go, you can probably,
yeah,
we talked about this. You're like, oh,
yeah,
there, the park. And I know this park where I saw this
yeah,
girl online. And
yeah, yeah,
being a public account, I do think those are a lot of the security factors we start thinking
yeah,
about for ourselves. Like, we are human, we do have things, but I think the reality of you putting your face out there and you feeling like you are connecting with people, I almost feel
yeah,
like that was the kick in the butt you needed to really
yeah.
like say, I'm going to go and move into
And
this full force.
yeah, I think that was definitely step one of it, of like me pushing myself to be like, okay, like if you really want to do this, because deep down, I always wanted to like make this into like what I did for my job, like full time and like work for myself. But like I
Okay,
wouldn't
so
listen.
tell them what you
Yeah.
do for your full-time work.
Oh, I do TV commercials. I edit TV commercials.
She's a super
So
editor.
I just, they give me the footage and I put it together.
Okay, she's literally not crediting herself enough. Like, girl has made commercials like you've seen on TV, Amazon things.
I mean, I've
You're like not
done,
just a TV commercial editor, girl. Like, you have done big projects.
yeah. And that's the thing though, is that like, I've been in this industry for like 10 years now. And to work your way up to become an editor, you have to be an assistant for like years and years and then a senior assistant. And then so I finally made editor and I was like, this is what I've always wanted. Like, I was so excited. I got my own like big, beautiful office downtown. I was like, this is amazing. I got my own assistant and I'm like, I've made it. And then like I started to realize more and more how much I didn't actually have creative say into what was being made,
Right.
and how we work with a lot of agencies, and these advertising agencies come in, they contract us and they say, okay, we're making this Whirlpool commercial or whatever, and they're paying, a ton of money to my company to like get this done. So they're like, this is the vision that we sold to the client. So this is what we're going to make, and I would make that, and that's great, and it goes on air, and I like, there are times where you show the client alternate versions that you have in your head, or like that you're like maybe this, and
Or
once in a
that you
blue
think is
moon,
better. Like,
right,
you
and
like
once
what you put out.
yeah, and once in a while they'll go with them, but a lot of times it's like tied up in what they've sold to the client. And it became really disheartening because I felt like I got into this industry wanting to create beautiful, wonderful things that like literally when I was younger, if you told me my ideal thing to create, it would be like Nike commercials or like commercials that make you want to get up and move or like donate to a cause, like really emotionally compelling spots. And I have done them here and there in terms of getting to make more emotional storytelling spots, but like it's still very like cagey. Like it's very limited on what I can do. And so I it just felt like really lost. And I remember I was at the gym and I saw one of my commercials come up on the TV. And I was just I like years ago, I would have thought that was so cool. And I was just like, I just don't even care. And that's what
You're
I
like
was
so
like,
desensitized to your work.
yeah, because it's like, and I see them like all the time. And it's just like, because it's almost like a little like it's cool that I did that. And it was a really great experience to be able to work on such like, or it is to be able, like, I'm still doing it to work on big brands, but it's like, it also part of me, I remember at the gym, like just being like, part of me like just kind of died a little. I was just like, that makes me kind of sad because I know like how that was made. And yes, I physically made it, but like, I don't know, bad taste in my mouth. So all that being said, part of me for so long has just like had this fire in me of like, you are meant for more. Like you're meant for a bigger purpose. And like, I'm like, I don't know what that is. But then I started diving into a lot of self-development work and meditation and like quote, everybody says like finding yourself. Like I really don't like that term, but like I honestly did. I went through a path of like going through a lot of uncovering of like deep stuff, deep work. I had hired a coach maybe 2 years ago now to like help me start going through stuff. And she took me more down like a spiritual path of like it was crazy. But like anyway, it was just not religious, story, spiritual of like connecting with the universe and stuff like
Sure.
that. And like vibrational frequencies and that holy crap opened my world to like, I don't know, whole new light. But anyway, I had this like moment where I realized like, you know what? Like I could do this. Like, I don't know, unfortunately, what this is, but I could go with my gut. I could actually like work for myself. I could do something in moments. I don't know. And then so it kept growing to where I started investing in coaches and mentors. And I use the term investing because I truly believe that it's not spending money. I think it's like taking your money to really have someone who cares about you help you grow and teach you like how they took their path. And just in the past year, like I decided that like I'm gonna leave my job in June of 2025. And I hope nobody there is listening. Um but I'm yeah, and I'm building a coaching business around self-improvement and empowerment and wellness, and not necessarily wellness in the terms of like you need to be exercising and
Mental wellness.
yeah, like yeah. I mean, eating whole foods is like part of it, but to make you fuel your body to feel good, but like overall like holistic wellness, but really a lot of just like empowerment, self-improvement, and like I want to take people who feel like they don't know what to do or they like can't do it or whatever that it is. I want to take them and just like feed them everything I know and just like push them to be like, you have it in you to do this. And I know you can, and you know you can. We just have to light that light that's like so deep in the bottom of you, dim right now. Just light that up. And so when I started creating content and around that, and I started actually writing out the business plan to like build this, I felt like high. Like I felt like it's a lot of work, but this feels
That's your
so good to
that's
me.
your intuition, like speaking to you
Absolutely.
5,000%.
Absolutely. And so I know that even though like actually building the business has been a lot of work, it's been like, late nights after work or really early mornings. And I also, have this 8-month-old baby and I'm like trying to figure everything out. But it's like when I work on it, I feel like I'm buzzing. I'm like, hell yeah. And I also know it's like I'm building this to like genuinely help other people. And I think you and I talked about the term that like we don't like the term coach.
Right.
I have just hated that term for so long because I feel like everyone's like, "Oh, I'm a life coach." And you're like, "Are you? Like, what are
Because
you like?"
at this point, everybody's coaching everybody. We are in the social media world where like anybody can just say like on Instagram, I'm a coach for this, I'm a coach for that.
Yeah.
Like even the multi-level marketing world put Beachbody coaches, and like these are just normal people selling a program, you know?
Yeah.
I think we
Yeah,
overuse the term for sure.
absolutely. And so I think I was so resistant to that term because in my mind, I had a very limited belief that all coaches are people who don't know what they're doing and they actually don't really give a shit. And they just want to like kind of like take your money and like tell you a few like facts you could Google and then be on their way. And they aren't experienced. And so, but then I have two coaches right now, two business coaches. These guys are, I can't even get into it. Like they have really changed my life so far. I'm in their group coaching program and it's only like 10 of us or something. They genuinely want to see every person succeed. And like just watching them work, I'm like, hell yeah. Like I know that I'm meant to be in this group, intuition. And I know that like this is what's meant for me because I
Yeah.
see how they care about every person in here. And I've seen their like what they've done with other people. It's unbelievable. So that like really opened or shone light on for me the term like coach. I'm like, okay, that term is not all bad, but like
It's
it's
not
still
bad, but we do overuse it. I was going to say, you were talking about how you feel like you're buzzing from the coaching programs that you're in, and you
yeah,
feel like you're buzzing when you're doing you're like setting up your
yeah,
program. What do you think when we're talking like your ego? Do you ever feel like
yeah.
it's getting in the way of this project a little bit?
Oh yeah, yeah. But
I'm like,
like,
in what way?
so I would say my ego mainly gets in the way when it comes to putting out social media content because it will I think it's because very close friends and family follow me. It might be different if like none of them follow me and I was just like, oh, this is just like people like that. I don't know. I don't really care about their opinion.
My thought around this is like, okay, I have this podcast, right? And
Yeah.
I have all the same feelings that you feel about your program towards my podcast.
Yeah.
And like for a long time, like if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you heard that I created a YouTube where I was doing thrift hauls.
Yeah.
When I was doing all the YouTube stuff, I really wasn't like creating the content, like making the videos was almost like I didn't even enjoy that. I was
Yeah.
doing it because I liked showing people what I found, but I
Yeah.
didn't care about making the videos. And then like I'm
Yeah.
like, who the fuck am I showing these to?
Yeah.
Nobody cares. And that was like the ego in me. But I really love thrifting. So the
Yeah.
intuition in me is like, oh, you should do this, Madison.
Yeah.
But there was like half of the intuition was there.
Yeah.
The podcast thing has been floating around for me for like way longer than I wanted to. I can even admit 4 years, 5 years,
Yeah.
maybe. And I just never did it because I felt like you, like my friends and family are going to watch. They're going to hear me talk about my podcast, things on my podcast. Maybe they don't
Yeah.
want to hear. Or the reality is 90% of almost everyone in my family, nobody listens to this. So why am I worrying? They don't listen. The other day, somebody asked me what number I was on. I said 43. They're like, oh my gosh, how often
Yeah.
do you do them? This is someone in my immediate circle, Emily.
Yeah.
My immediate circle. And I think like we let our families and our friends and that ego
Yeah.
thought of like, I'm going to create this podcast. What am I going to talk about? What my family is going to have all their ideas. Sure. I've had multiple people in my family say, oh, your podcast is fake. It's not authentic to you. But I'm like, I think those people saying that are the people who don't really know me authentically in my family.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, I think when I'm doing my podcast stuff and I tell you all the time, even when I'm really frustrated, I'll text you. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I did this myself, but it took me a really long time. Or I did this and
Yeah.
I'm fucked. Like there was a time I didn't even put a podcast out 1 week because of what? I had an issue with some technology stuff, but I still put it up like a day later.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself, like the intuition of doing this podcast is literally the lighter fluid that I need, that it hasn't gone away.
Right.
Even every week, I'm struggling sometimes to even put out an episode because I'm struggling with my own mental health issues. I'm still doing it because
Yeah.
inside the fire is lit.
Yeah.
And I know you have that. And that is
Yeah.
literally like when people are like, what is intuition versus ego?
Yeah.
The fire is in your belly and like you don't know how to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And you've had that fire, like honestly, for a
I've had this fire for a long
time.
I have. And it's funny because I remember my first coach years ago, she was like, what, what is your dream? Like, what if you had no limitations? Like, if you couldn't fail, if money didn't matter, like, what's your dream? And I was like, I would run my own company that would just like help others be the best version of themselves and also incorporate everything in wellness, but also like there's, I mean, that's a whole other episode, the universe side of things, but like so many things that I've learned to just also transition myself, like from I used to be an incredibly anxious person, very short fuse, stressed out all the time, overwhelmed, very angry, I feel, to like, you know, I still struggle, especially with having a little baby, when you get no sleep, like patience is hard sometimes, but like I feel so much more balanced. It's also kind of ironic. I'm talking about wellness and I have like a terrible cold right now, but I just overall, like,
The
I
cold
feel
part,
like,
you can't
yeah,
help that.
right. But overall, I just feel like I have learned so many things that have helped me just have a much more solid sense of like inner peace about things and like about who I am. And like I have this knowing that like this is gonna work. Like I know in my soul, like this is gonna work. And when I told my parents, I literally like I hadn't told them for so long because I was just like, not because of my ego even, but I just didn't want to like deal with the questions of
Sure.
like, why are you leaving your job? Like you've been there doing that for 10 years, like you made it, blah blah blah. Not because of my ego, but I just didn't want to like feel the questions of like, oh, you've been doing this forever and this is what you went to school for and blah blah blah. And because I did my undergrad and then I did film school. So I was in school for like a long time and it was a lot of money. And it's like, okay, well, you better do this for the rest of your life because this is what you invested in. It's like, no,
Yeah.
like people can change their minds. So anyway, I told them, Madison, and I'm not joking. I am not joking. I took photos because they laughed at me so hard that I wanted to remember how hard they laughed. So I took pictures. I had them on
Them
my phone
laughing.
of them laughing. And I wasn't even like, I was like kind of bummed out, but there was just part of me that's like, fuck it. I'm going to show them.
How
And
did
like,
that like feel? Did
I
that
mean,
feel hurtful for you?
it, it did, but like, only mildly, to be honest, because I literally looked at them like little puppies that I'm like, they have no idea what I'm gonna build.
Correct.
Like
They
I'm
have
gonna
no idea.
they have no idea. Like they don't know. Their thinking
They
is
only
so
see what
in a
they know.
box.
They
Right.
only have the idea of what
Yeah.
they think.
Yeah.
They
And then
don't.
so, yeah, my dad actually called me 2 days later and he was like, I just want to apologize to you for laughing at you. And he's like, I want you to know that I support you, and like all this stuff. And like almost made me emotional. And I was like, no, it's fine. He's like, no, like, I need you to know, like, I'm always going to support whatever you do. And we shouldn't have laughed at you. And I was, but also when they were laughing, I was like, see, like kind of joking with them. I was like, this is why I don't tell you guys stuff because you laughed at my dreams. Like,
I
but
think
it,
it's really hard with our parents. I mean, we're
yeah,
both in our 30s and we're
yeah,
both adults, and you're actually a parent now,
yeah,
And when I was in high school, Emily, I heard that like our generation would change our career at least 3 times. Like I heard that when I was in high
yeah,
school. Like
yeah,
be prepared. Like you'll change your career path 3 times. It's not normal anymore for people to have one career for a long
yeah,
time. And I do think there are professions where you do that.
yeah,
Doctors, police officers, even mail workers, like you get pension, whatever. There's reasons and rhymes for those things. But
yeah.
in your career, you have avenues that are really endless, I think, with what skill sets you have with like editing, especially in today's time.
Yeah.
Like you, and I think
Well,
I've
you have those
said
skills
this
now
to you.
too, because you've been editing
Yeah,
podcasts
it's
and
very, very true.
yeah,
And I
and
think that
all
about
your
myself a
social.
lot. Yeah, right. I think
Yeah.
that I'm like, and I did that for a minute. I was doing social media content creation for a frozen yogurt company, and I was doing socials for Orange Theory, and I was doing things for a while. And did I like it? Sure. But inside, doing content creation for brands doesn't make me happy.
Right.
That's not that my ego is like, girl, you can do this.
Yeah.
You have the capability, you have the skill set, and yeah,
Yeah.
you could probably do it better than what you're seeing. But
Yeah.
I am at a point in my life where my intuition is like, happiness is my goal. More
Yes.
freedom, more little happy feelers all the time is what I'm focused on, and not like just doing this because I can.
Right.
And I'm very good at just doing things because I can. That is my ego. I'm like,
Yeah.
I could make balloon arches. I could make a balloon arch business. I could have a cotton candy business. I did that. But inside, it was just let me monetize.
Yeah.
That's my ego,
Yeah. But that's
5,000%.
also like, but so your ego's also doing that because like you being able to monetize something is you being able to provide for yourself and like finance, like money these days. That is how we exchange like goods and services.
Yep.
Sorry, I keep tapping my mic. Money is how we exchange goods and services. And so that's how we in the current world get food, And so like it's so interesting because like 300,000 years ago, when like Homo sapiens were first around, like we literally were surviving in these groups to hunt together, to do all that stuff. And so if you were ostracized then, it was literally a death sentence because you could not
Basically.
survive on your own. And so this seed has been planted so deeply, so innately in us, like through all these years, so that now when we feel like, that's why it comes up in our ego of like, oh, I shouldn't post this, like, because, and I mean, you're not saying these words exactly to yourself, but you feel I should post this because I don't want to not be socially accepted. Like you want to be quote unquote accepted, because if you're
Correct.
not with the group, your ego's like, that's really dangerous, when it's not, but it's because of all this like ingrained stories and like ingrained like things that we used to do in our mindset that happens, and it's wild. But it's like, that's why, because our brains are like not built to make us happy, they're built to help us stay alive, and that's what they will do at all costs.
100%. But I mean, like, that's not the way to live. Like,
Exactly.
this is not 1400 BC. Like, I'm
Right,
so
but
sorry, but we're living in these times where I feel like, why can't we start focusing more on our intuition and what we feel?
right,
Even in the 3,000 years ago, Emily, the
yeah,
people who lived in these groups, some people were not hunters, some people were not gatherers. Their intuition put them into groups based off of like what they felt they liked to do or what their skill set was really good at. That's how you were put into groups back then. It wasn't that like, oh, Emily, you know what? You really want to be a berry gatherer. We're going to let you gather the berries. No, sorry, girl. You're a great hunter. You're going to be our hunter. It was that. And I think a lot of us are taught like, this is what you have to do because this is what we are taught. This is what you're good at. This is how you're going to make money.
yeah,
But the reality is we need to live our lives on intuition. Like I really like to gather berries and I would love to forage all day. But you're not a good berry forager. So why the fuck are you going to forage berries? Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Like just
Well,
because you
because
want to do that
yeah,
and your intuition is saying, do it. Your ego's like, you might not be a good berry forager though. But it's like,
yeah,
but I could be a good berry forager. I really want to
yeah.
frolic through the berries.
Yeah, but it's like now the whole way that the system is set up now is like, I love my parents to death, but my dad is going to be 81 years old next month. Like he was born in 1943. And
Okay.
so his he's the most loving person, but his mindset is so old school in terms of, you must have a college education to be successful. You must go to a good college. You must like check all these boxes. Like he's just so traditional in his thinking, and I get why. And it's because his parents like, oh, always he always finishes his plate still, and I'm
Oh,
like, you don't need to do that. He's like, you don't want to waste food, you cannot waste food. Like, I don't know, it's just really
he's from a
interesting. But
different
like,
time. It's a
he
depression
is
time,
for sure, for sure. But at the same time, it's been interesting, my connection with him, because I feel like I've kind of opened his eyes to certain things over the years of like, oh, like I could do this or I could do that, or like this is a different way of seeing things. And for example, his best friend, since they were like 8 years old, so for like over 70 years, his best friend was engaged to a woman, and then the engagement didn't work out. And then his best friend came out, was like, I'm gay. And almost everyone kind of bailed on this guy except my dad. And my dad's like, I still love you. And like, I like, okay, you are who you are. And like, that was so, I think that was a really good mind like opening experience for my dad, because he got to know the person before judging a label in
absolutely.
those times back then when that wasn't accepted. And so he is much more like, okay, like do what you want to do in those sense. But like I don't know, he definitely has certain perceptions of quote unquote success. And so when I told him this, he was just really not understanding it at first. But I don't know. I think
we live in different times, and like that's the crazy thing is even at 81, your dad has to progress too.
Yeah, and he does. He actually he does. Yeah.
And
So
I mean, obviously he is a little more progressive than you maybe even lead on, because if he had that open mindset towards someone get gay, what was it, in
yeah,
the 50s?
yeah.
What was that time, the 50s, the 60s?
It would have been the 70s
Okay.
because he was born in 43, and I think his friend was probably like in his 30s at the time. So, but still, you know,
I definitely think that's it's hard with our parents, and like
yeah,
you see them in a different light, because we
yeah,
also think like you want to make your parents proud,
yeah, for sure.
and it's like your parents are, you're like telling them you're going to do something, and maybe even in the back of our minds, like you have that intuition where you're buzzing, and then the ego is sitting there and it's like, but you could fail. And then
Yeah,
your parents laugh at you, and then you're
yeah,
like, okay, they think I could fail too.
yeah.
So maybe your ego starts to get in the way, but it really didn't seem like it did. And I kind of am like,
No, because I think also I
you
kind of
expected
knew
that?
that not that I did not I did not expect that that they were gonna laugh at me like that. Like I'll show you the pictures later.
Yeah,
It's like
please send me
really
a
like
text.
it was like, and I think that me taking the pictures made them laugh more because I was like, this is why I don't tell you guys stuff. But I did expect them to raise a lot of questions, which they did. They asked me about like medical benefits,
Okay.
and which is
Those are
fair
legit
because
questions.
right, right. But like that's right where their mind goes. Their mind didn't go to like, oh, this is what you're really passionate about. It went to like, okay, how are you gonna have medical benefits? Like,
How are
how
you
are
going
you
to
gonna support
survive?
your son? Like all this stuff. So and I get that. Like that's fair. But yeah, it's just it's so interesting. Like, and it's kind of wild. Like I told you I was doing for the past like 90 days of like me 100% just like leaning into intuition. Like I think when you really take a step back when something comes up and like try to like we are not our thoughts. Like you have thoughts
Right.
pop in your mind, but when you're able to observe your thoughts and be like, cool, I'm in this situation. I am, and you stop and recognize how you're feeling and what you're thinking. If you can do that, it's so interesting how things unfold when you make your decision. Um, because I decided, for 90 days, I'm just going to only go with my intuition on things. And I had felt intuitively that I wanted to do that for a while. And then I was like, okay, I'm just going to do this. And I don't know if I told you this, but that night I went to bed and I was like, oh shoot, I need to know like what the date is 90 days from today so I know when I, wrap up my experiment. And I was like, Alexa, what's the date 90 days from today? And it was my birthday. And I was like, yeah, I'm definitely supposed to be doing this.
Yeah. I'm a numbers person, so for me, I'm like all for it. Like I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, the signs are there, and I feel like if you're ignoring the signs, that's the ego
Yeah.
really getting in the way. It's like that block. So
Okay.
what does intuition mean to you, like personally, and like how do you recognize when you're actually relying on this? I know we've been talking about it really with our program, but your
Yeah.
program, but like,
Yeah.
how do
I
you
think
know
it
if
could
you're
go
really
like,
sticking with it?
so intuition for me is definitely like a very peaceful feeling. And it feels sometimes like I can feel it in my gut, sometimes it's in my chest, but it's a physical feeling. It's like you can't explain why, but it's kind of like an internal knowing. Like intuition is instinctual. And then like for ego, it's definitely your logical thinking mind. So it's your brain like trying to organize and like figure everything out and like make a plan.
And then that ego would be, and it's like basically you're saying that your ego would be like everything that's going against your intuition.
Not necessarily, because sometimes they can work together. Um, but the ego is the one that is going to plant self-doubt. And especially if it's something you've never done before, because the ego does not want you to go outside of your comfort zone because it's like this is saying like this is not safe. And so your ego's job is to keep you in this bubble so that we're safe and alive. So it's the seeds of self-doubt and like all that.
But I feel like a lot of the ego and stuff that we have for ourselves, like that self doubt, like we learn that ego because as a child,
Yeah.
yeah, you have self-doubt. Yeah, they'll say, oh, you'll get hurt. But like a lot of times it's like the ego starts to really hit hard because maybe not even like that you haven't done something before. Like you have done something before and you failed at it really bad the first time.
Yeah.
Your
It's like, do you want
ego,
to be embarrassed again?
your ego will come right back up.
Yeah.
And I know, I think like this is something that a lot of people struggle with is they're like a lot of people are like, oh, they have a really big ego.
Yeah.
And I think it's just because it's how we want the world to see us. And it's
Yeah, that's
how,
the other side of ego is perception of from others.
and I think
So
that's
it's
hard.
yeah. Oh yeah, because it's having you know, like I said before, it's wanting to be accepted and wanting to be seen as like I don't know, like where people perceive you like really well, like they have a really good perception of you.
Like I feel like I
Like,
have a good example for this, like with my intuition versus ego. Like this podcast, it's great. Like last week I was talking to one of my friends. She's like, how's your podcast going? I'm like, it's great. She's like, is it growing? I said, no, it's not. It's been stagnant. Like the
not
numbers,
yet,
not
not
yet.
yet.
But I just was like, no. But the ego in me is like, I want to say, yeah, it's growing. And because if I tell her no, it's not, my thought is like, my ego, like, she's gonna be like, well, it's not that successful. Like, this podcast is just like another podcast.
Yeah,
That's the ego in me, like saying, like, well, you know what? I'm just like everybody else.
yeah,
Intuition,
exactly.
intuition is Madison, this is for you. Ego is
Right.
like, but I made this and I would love the validation of her to say,
Yeah,
hey, I love that episode and thank you so much for doing that. But that's not what it's there for. My
yeah,
ego
I
and
think,
my intuition really smacked together hard on this podcast is
yeah,
these examples for me.
yeah. Like, I think validation is a huge one for ego. Like, we all feel like we need to be validated.
When you're faced with a difficult decision, do you usually feel like you're focusing more on what your ego's telling you or your intuition?
I used to definitely be more focused on my ego.
I think you're more
Uh,
logical of a person.
yeah, I'm definitely logical, but I am really pushing myself within this challenge to go full force intuition. So but I think everybody's built to logically, like, go through your mind first of like
Yeah, but I think I'm the
what makes
opposite.
sense.
I
Really? You think
think
you
I'm
go with
an
your gut first?
yeah. Like I'm a no, like actually I don't even know. I feel like my therapist now would tell me no, you're a yes person, but
Yeah.
I feel like I'm a no person. Like if it doesn't
Yeah.
feel right, I'm like no. And I mean, I've had a lot of jobs where I knew the exit time was there
Yeah.
and I was maybe just hanging on a little too long. Like my ego is like, well, you need this for this
Yeah.
money, that like, but my intuition was like, this doesn't light your fire anymore. This isn't here. And like, I knew I was hanging on for like ego,
Right.
but I find that I move more with intuition. Like,
Right.
I don't, I don't let the, I try not to like, I'm not a logical person, I guess.
Yeah.
Like I think it's who you are, like your sign, like the Virgo in you people are like very logical people.
Right.
You and Kendra share the same birthday, and my stepdad is also September 1st. And
Ooh.
all three of you guys have very like your thought process all kind of like run the same. Like you're
Right.
very slow and methodical. And I'm a like, oh, I want to do this, I'm gonna do it. That's kind
Yeah.
of how I am. I will figure it out as I go. And I think that's where I let my intuition kind of lead. And then my ego gets the best of me later.
Yeah.
After I've
Yeah.
started something and it's not working, I start to feel like, okay,
Yeah.
you suck. You're like, no one likes this. Or I let all the everyone else's like opinions and what they have said really knock into my ego. And then I'm like, okay, maybe my intuition was wrong. But usually I feel like that fire is there because I have a real reason for it,
Yeah.
even
Well,
if
I
it's a
also
temporary
like
intuition.
when that happens, I have this quote that I like that's so it's like something along the lines of like when faced like when you're going after your dream or your passion or whatever and like obstacles come your way, it's the universe's way of testing you if you really want this or not, being like,
Right.
cool, do you really want this? And you're like, yes. And like, so I try to think of that when stuff comes up and you're just like, God, why? So
I mean, it's hard. I know like it's interesting to say like I definitely notice you're more on the I feel like you follow the ego first versus your intuition, but you have been flipping the other way. And
Yeah.
you did make that turn a long time ago. I feel like when you
Yeah.
decided to go face full on Instagram,
Baseball.
I think
Full
that was,
face.
yeah, I think that was totally when you were like, intuition is going to lead me. I'm not going
Yeah.
to fight with my ego anymore.
Yeah.
And I like love that for you, because I think I noticed that turning point. But I
Oh,
think
thanks.
it's really hard for a lot of people to just,
Yeah.
I think those two things in general is, it's really a fight for all of us. Cause
Oh, for sure.
I was doing the research, trying to, like, I told you, I'm like, let me do some research on this before I start sending you things. Because I'm like, I really wanted to have a better understanding. Like, of course, we all know what our intuition is. We all know what our ego feels like. But I think there's a lot of components to this.
Oh, yeah. And they
I think,
also like they weave together a lot. It's not just like necessarily one or the other. It's
yeah,
like
like they
there's,
mesh.
yes.
We both did that at the same time. Yeah, they do mesh together. And I think that's where we're battling. Like, am I following my intuition, or is this my ego?
Right.
And I don't know, maybe I think in our 30s, like I think in our 20s, we follow a lot more of our intuition. Like, we're like, okay, I'm young, I think I should try. Not everybody, because not everyone's as open and willing to do. Like how you talked about your
Uh-huh.
parents have a very checkbox life for you. I don't have that. My mom kind of let
Yeah.
me, I really, okay, intuition for me, like this is the best example. Every single job I have has been an intuition based job.
That's
I have
cool.
I have never worked somewhere where I was like, I'm gonna do this. This is what I want to do. All my jobs have landed in my lap based off of what is going on intuitively in my life.
That's cool.
Like when I was younger, I really liked, I don't know, I worked at Plato's Closet, if you know of that
Oh,
store.
I know Plato's Closet.
Yeah, I was an assistant store manager for 6 years.
Ooh.
I did
Oh,
that from the
wow.
time I was 16 till I was like 20, really 15 to the time I was 21. And that like fell in my lap because I just like to thrift and do secondhand. Like it's crazy because that's what I do for my real life business now.
Yeah.
Like that's what I did when I was a kid. And now I resell clothes for a living. But
Yeah.
that fell in my lap because I shopped at that store a lot. Then I worked at a pizza place. That was just like a shitty little job that my friend wanted me to work at. And I love that. I ended up becoming a host, not a hostess, a waitress. Never did I ever want to be a waitress. Like I can't tell you I wanted to serve tables, but it just kind of like landed in my lap at the time. Like my mom worked at this
Yeah.
bar, and I just kind of went with my intuition. Like I needed more money. More money was flowing that way. It felt like I needed a change. Like that landed in my lap. And then I
Yeah.
got fit and lost a lot of weight and became a fitness coach. Like
Yeah.
my intuition led me to that. It wasn't my ego. It wasn't like, Madison, you're fit. This seems like the next thing for you to do. It was like, hey, you would be great at this. My intuition was like
Yeah.
fired up when I would be in class and they'd be on the microphone. Like, I would love to do this.
Yeah.
So
And then you did it for a while.
yeah, almost 8 years. So,
Yeah.
I mean, like all of that was like intuition. Like, I never went into any of these jobs with like, this is what I want to do. Like, it was kind of like a flow.
Yeah.
And then when I got out of that Orange Theory, I did social media content creation because it just fell in line with what I was already doing. And I
Yeah.
feel like I could have followed my ego a lot more and been like, you know what, you're not in a safety net with financials. Like, cause I have not been financially secure since COVID. Since 2020, I
Yeah.
just was like, I'm gonna
But you're
figure
still
it
making
out.
it. You still
Yeah,
got your house.
100%. If I could pay my mortgage, if
Yeah.
I can pay my bills, we are good. So
Yeah.
I really do feel that I lead my life with intuition. Like so much so I made Kendra, I shouldn't say I made her. I was like, girl, you should quit your job. You're
Yeah.
not happy. You have migraines. Like, let's do something that feels better for you. Like, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
And like, her ego is like, I need to have this job because
Yeah.
my parents are going to think I'm a failure for
Yeah.
not having a job in the field that she went to college for.
Right.
And for not having like a legit 9 to 5 job is a failure. And I think to myself all the time, I'm like, I don't live that way. I don't live like that ego side where like, my dad would feel like how you were saying, like my parents have the checklist. Kendra's parents are the same.
Yeah.
So I always think I was lucky to be able to kind of fall in line with jobs based off of what was kind of guiding me at the time, like what
Right.
felt good versus having the need for that job.
Yeah.
And I really think that's why I feel like I've been more on the intuitive workload versus the ego. Like I'm here because of this. My
Yeah.
parents want me to be here. I'm staying because of this. It's like I didn't want to do it anymore. I left.
Yeah.
And I think there might be a handful of people like me too. But I think that's where I'm very different in that aspect. And I think sometimes I wish I was more logical. I'm not.
I mean, but I think that, I mean, everybody believes different things for sure. But my personal belief is like, you will be the most fulfilled when you go with your intuition every time.
How could you not?
I don't know. Some
It's like,
people are just too locked into their
girl, it's like you're on
limited
a,
mindsets.
my thought process on this is like, okay, you're walking down this path and then there's like two paths that split and one of them has a really bright light and one of them just has, it's like fucking dark.
Yeah.
You're not going down the dark road. I'm sorry. Unless
Some
maybe you
people
have a
do though.
flashlight or you like that darkness, but I am not that person.
Yeah.
I will go where it does feel safe. And maybe saying that is like, that is my ego speaking. Like, I like safety, but I also like knowing that it feels safe and good for
Yeah.
me. I won't go
Yeah.
where it feels safe. If it was on that path and the light is on, but there's a bunch of scary people on that path, I might probably go down the dark path because
Yeah.
I'd rather go down the uncertain path than that scary path that's lit up with all the creatures and shit. Like, I don't know.
No thanks.
Yeah, it's like my intuition sometimes will lead me down the darker road. I guess that's true. I guess I
Yeah.
have I've been like right now in the last 4 years, I've been down the darker road of uncertainty because that's where my intuition is like, that lit up road doesn't look right now for me.
Yeah.
So I think maybe I guess I just put a whole new like little thought process in my brain today.
That's a good way to
But
look at it.
yeah, I think though the ego thing we follow a lot harder though because of
Yeah.
you are the safety, this, that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Because it's like how we were created.
Do you think that like your intuition and rational thinking coincide? You think
Coexist.
it, yeah,
Yeah.
you think it's
Oh yeah.
possible?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. I think that's what we were talking about earlier, like how they like weave together, like for sure. Like I think that's I don't think it's ever possible to get rid of your ego completely. It's just part of
No
us.
way. It's always there.
But so I think being able to use both of these to your advantage is like, the sweet spot, but leaning on your intuition more. Um,
And how do you think somebody would be able to lean into your intuition more?
dude, it sounds cheesy, but go with your gut. Like go
And what
with
does that
literally
feel? What does that
go
feel like, Emily?
like
You know it better than anyone because you really like leaned into this hard recently.
I feel like if you have a decision to make and you like get yourself in a quiet spot. I don't know, maybe put on some high vibrational frequency music, look it up on YouTube, shut your eyes, and literally sit there and just like think about option A that you have. Say it's like you get a job offer somewhere, okay? And you're like unsure, and you sit down and think about how you would feel. Not about the money, not about the location, not about the status or name of the company, even if it's like Google or whatever. How would you feel with that actual job and why? And like feel into that and then think about option, like the other option. I think I said option A, B first, but and think about how would you feel if you didn't take that job or if you took the job at a different company. And like, so say company A was going to pay you like a shit ton more money, but you knew you wouldn't like the job as much, but like their health insurance was awesome and the location was awesome, but you knew you would just hate it. And like, you also didn't vibe like with the people interviewing. You're like, I don't really like, I don't know. I get a weird sense of these people. That's the other thing with intuition. Like when you meet people, it's huge.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
good topic we should move into
and
too.
so like basically when you look at those options and you go with how it makes you feel, not what you think about it, like you really like just getting quiet and you think about how do I feel, the one that you feel better about, that's your intuition. So
I have a good story on this. So like
yeah.
back in August, we're in June now, but back in August last year, I actually was like really into doing like hot yoga.
Yeah.
I am a hot yoga in and out, which sucks because I just haven't been consistent in the last few years. But one of my friends teaches at a studio and she's amazing. And she like was like, "Hey Mad, would you be interested in teaching here? Like you can do this training. We're opening a brand new class at this studio." And I had taken the class. I'm like, oh, I would be really good at this. I'm like,
Yeah.
this is like right up my alley. It's a 30-minute class. I would have fun. Like I could picture myself doing it. Like I could see it.
Yeah.
And I did the training and everything. And then I went to Maine for a week. And like the whole time I was in Maine, we were like hiking and I was just thinking about this class that I would be teaching. And I like kind of like what you said. I was like, if I put the money aside, because I really could have used the money. I'm like, this would be
Yeah.
like a good chunk of change every month, like
Yeah.
committed money.
Yeah.
The time isn't a lot. But then I was like, everything else was compiling in my thoughts about it. Like my ego
Yeah.
was getting in the way, but like intuitively, I didn't feel like it was a fit for me.
Yeah.
But my friend was like, Madison, you'd be good at this. And when I went, I'm like, I would be good at this.
I would
And then
kill
I'm like,
this.
I would crush it. I took a
Yeah.
girl's class and I'm like, they were like, this is the OG of this class. And I'm like, oh, I would be way better than this girl. And I don't mean it. I don't mean it in like the aspect of like, she wasn't good. She was great. I loved
Yeah.
her class. I just think I bring a different energy than
Yeah.
like I was successful at what I did at Orange Theory because of who I am, not because of the program, not because of the
Yeah.
workout. It's because I remembered everybody's name and what music you liked. And
Yeah.
I am a very person, I love people. I do. I hate people, but I love people. But I think like after that week in Maine, and I had time to think about it, and I was like, I'm really leaning into my ego here because I know I would be good at this.
Yeah.
And I know I need the money. And I
Yeah.
know it would be like stability.
Yeah.
But my intuition was like, we got out of this, girl. We
Yeah.
don't want to teach anymore.
Yeah.
There's
And
a
like
reason why
all
we stopped.
those things that your mind is bringing up, like stability, money, like that's all the things that says safe, safe, safe,
Yeah.
safe.
Boom. And I was like, of course you want to feel safe. And of course I was like, but then I was like, no. And as soon as I got home, actually, I think when we were on the plane, I emailed the owner and I was like, this isn't going to be a fit for me. I did the
Yeah.
training, but it was like a lot of things. And I
Yeah.
feel like it's really hard. It was really hard for me to be like, no, because the opportunity was a good one.
Yeah.
And I could have really made like a new little place for myself. That's another thing. My ego was like, girl, you can make a community,
Yeah.
and then I was like, but that's not
Yeah.
where I want to be.
Yeah. That's
It
not what you
just
like resonate with.
the door opened, like
Yeah.
when you're walking down a hallway and the door
Yeah.
just opened and you're
Yeah.
like, let me look inside. And I
And then you're
did.
like, nah.
Yeah. Then I was like, close this door.
Yeah.
It was really,
More gonna open down the rest of the
it was
hallway
like, let me
anyway.
keep walking. My intuition was like, girl, keep walking.
Yeah.
Something else
Yeah.
would be down there for you. And it sure did. I mean, I've
Yeah.
been catering and doing other things, but it's a different flexibility for me.
Yeah.
If I went to teaching at a studio, I would be committed to a set schedule every week.
Yeah.
And for me, that's not what I wanted.
Yeah.
So I was really playing with myself there.
Yeah.
But
That's cool though.
yeah, I think that was like a really good moment of intuition versus ego for
Yeah.
myself. And I think, I don't think we get these opportunities often.
Right.
If you work and you're happy at your place of work, like the 9 to 5, like I don't think a lot of people have to fight this. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't feel a lot of people have to fight this when they feel like, I don't want to say you're complacent, but
They're comfortable.
you're okay with what your life looks
You're
like.
comfortable. Yeah.
Like maybe you don't really have like a real drive or purpose. I even don't want to say that. There are
Yeah.
people that are very okay with the boring life and not doing more than what they need to do, but I'm not that person.
Right. But to them, it's not boring.
No,
To
it's
them,
not. It's
right.
not.
And so that's what's interesting is like, I remember like years and years and years ago when I like first got in the job market, I was like, oh, I would never want to run my own business because like I love having a steady paycheck. I love having my insurance. Like I love having things set up for me. I know when I'm going to get paid. I know when I have to be at work, like all that.
It's honestly, it's a luxury in some ways.
And then after a while, I was like, what the hell is this? But
It's hard.
yeah,
It is really hard, but I mean, there's pros and cons to everything. And I think, the people that are comfortable, as you want to say, I
yeah,
think, it's almost like that. I almost think sometimes if you're just comfortable, you're not really like following any kind of intuition. You're just kind of like going with what the gut, the ego, not the gut, I should even say. Cause I think there's a lot of people who want more for themselves. They're just like, oh, you're just like, I don't really know how to get there.
yeah,
And you have that ego in the way. Like the intuition always falls out of place, I think, for most people.
yeah. And it's like I had lunch with my brother like it's like 2 years ago now, around Christmas time. And I remember sitting at the restaurant with him, and he works in New York, and uh, he has always liked to make a lot of money. He is
Okay.
a very typical New York business guy. And but his jobs have caused an extreme amount of stress on him, both physically and mentally. And it's like made him sick. And I look at him and I've told him, like, this isn't worth it. I think you should leave New York, whatever. At any rate, we were talking and I remember saying, like, my dream, I would love to, like, run my own business, like work for myself and like be successful doing that. And I remember he looked at me and he rolled his eyes and he's like, well, yeah, like that's what everyone wants, but like that's not realistic. And it's
That's
like
his ego.
right there. It's like the fact that your mind can't even jump out of that box to be like, it's
Right.
possible.
That's what I
Like it
mean. Like
is possible.
the
Yeah, it's
intuition
hard, but
doesn't,
it's possible.
it's almost like they've turned off that intuition switch.
Yes.
Like it's
Yeah.
not, it's not possible for them, like, because they've already set up this life in that ego world. I
Right.
don't know. I think like I have a harder time viewing that because I'm more intuitive.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Love this conversation because I think it's just a lot of facets to it and a lot of different avenues to go down. And I mean, it's like, it's really a good question for yourself. Like in a day-to-day basis, like, are you doing things because your intuition tells you you should do that? Or are you
Yeah.
doing that because your ego?
Yeah. Anybody who's listening to this, I would challenge them, just not that you have to go with your intuition, but like for the next just like week or so, whenever you come upon like a decision, like just try to stop yourself for a second and like think and feel and just see, am I making this decision with my ego or my intuition? And it's so interesting when you start to like stop and like be that eagle eye
Analyze.
view of your thoughts instead of like identifying with your thoughts. It's kind of wild. It's kind of wild. And so it's a really interesting experiment.
I think it's also like being a little more self-aware.
Yeah, absolutely. 1,000% self-awareness.
And I feel like this is a big problem for most people.
Oh yeah.
Self-aware, being self-aware is like, I think 80% of people don't have that. Like they
Right.
have no
Yeah.
idea what they're working with, who they are.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you're listening to my podcast or this episode, I really think you're probably someone who is maybe a little more self-aware. You're looking for change. You're finding this podcast is for cycle breakers. It is for people that are not
People who are
necessarily.
more open-minded.
Absolutely. Because if you're
Yeah.
listening to this, you're like, this girl hates 9 to 5s, but that's not true. I work 9 to 5 sometimes too. I just think that I live a happier life. I do feel like I'm a happier human because I live on an intuitive spectrum
Yeah,
versus
absolutely.
following what my ego tells me.
Yeah.
Because I think the ego is always going to feel heavier and stronger.
Yeah.
Versus your intuition, though, it's like a bigger pull. And
Yeah.
I think it's like a magnet. Intuition for me is a magnet versus
Yeah.
like ego is like a rope attached to something.
Yeah.
And I think like you're attached, but the magnet is pulling you. And at some point you have to break the rope that's
Yeah.
holding you, that ego is holding you attached to whatever.
And the other thing is intuition relies on a lot of trust and faith in things that you don't know. It's the unknown.
Exactly.
Whereas like ego, it's like these are known factors, that these are safe, and unknown is like always so unsafe. But it's like having that trust to be like, okay, I'm just gonna do this, and like let's see what happens.
I think that's hard. We're all battling those things with like, let's
Yeah.
just see what happens. And
Yeah.
I think one of my best takeaways from intuition and like leading with that is being okay with failing
Yeah.
in your intuition, because just because like you have a burning desire to do something and you did it one way the first time that felt right to you, and you, even if you failed, you can still like revise that,
Yeah.
reroute it and make it better.
Yeah.
You actually still continue on with the burning fire you have. Even if like, I think a lot of times like that happens to me. My intuition guides me there. And then I'm like, oh, am I doing this right?
Yeah.
And then like, I feel like the flame is like dwindling a little bit, but it's because I'm not really following it all the way.
Yeah.
Or I just need to level it up a second. Or I know. This is what you need. My intuition will lead me there, but I need my people. I need support, because sometimes when I get my intuition is, I'm over here But it's like my little intuition is like, girl, you can't do this by yourself. You know what you want. And then
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, you're here. So let's figure out how to make this work because I know you're getting stressed out. The ego is like that little rope is like trying to get my little magnet.
Yeah.
I just think so often we're like there, but just because your intuition is there and you do it and it doesn't work doesn't mean your intuition was wrong.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
just a moment of let's clear this up, find the clarity in the intuition and what you want.
Yeah.
I'm glad we did this though, because I feel like you did that.
Oh, my intuition for like the magnet and
Your
the rope.
intuition clarity. Yeah. I feel like your
Yeah.
intuition clarity became like clear as day.
Yeah.
Like I feel
Absolutely.
like you were like, fuck the rope in the ego. I'm no longer tethered to that motherfucking rope.
Yeah.
And you were like, my magnet pull is too strong. And you literally broke the
I
rope.
gots to go.
You are
Yeah.
floating way out there, girl. You and the
Thanks.
magnet are off into
I got
outer
you floating
space.
out there with me.
I am. I'm not
Yeah.
going
You're like,
anywhere.
hey, I'm another magnet too. I'm like,
You're like, I'm a
great.
magnet. Do you want to stick with me?
I've got a fridge over here.
You want a drink?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really good. I think like intuition, you also need other people who are intuitive. And I think that's where I was getting at. It's really
Agreed.
hard to be an intuitive person and do it by yourself.
Yeah.
We
I think
need
that's
people.
like, yeah, community is so important and like finding other people. But that's so interesting because like when you also follow your intuition, you will naturally attract also like magnets, you will naturally attract other people who do that.
Your
It's
vibe
it's it's
attracts your tribe.
absolutely. And like I said, that'll be another episode, but I could get into vibrational frequencies and the
Can I put that on
craziest.
my list for us to
Dude,
talk about
what
next time?
I will do it.
I'm
It'll
big
blow
into
your
the
mind.
music, girl. I
No, no,
listen
no.
to it.
It's well, I mean, the music is good, but I like universal laws and stuff and how like literally your thoughts create your emotions. Your emotions create your like vibrational frequency because we're all vibrating at a certain frequency. And when you are vibrating at the same frequency as something else, it literally attracts. And so that's like the main basis of the law of attraction. But like
It's a real thing.
it's a real thing.
I actually said this wrong on my podcast like a few weeks ago, but Kendra was like, "Are you going to address this in your next podcast?" I'm like, "Nah, no one's going to remember or even know." But it's like what you were saying, and I think I texted it to you. It's like your mind is a seed. You either grow flowers or you either grow weeds.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it really starts up here. It
Yeah.
starts with your intuition, your ego, and everything up here before you make the move.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's a lot. The brain.
Dude, I think I'm definitely going to include intuition and ego in part of my coaching program for
I
sure.
think you should.
I think it's so important.
And then you can add this link in there too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be like, here, I'm not going to teach it to you. Just
Listen to, here's your homework. Here's your homework for the week.
You have to like and subscribe as well.
No.
This project is done.
No force shit.
No, I'm not. But I'm saying follow your intuition. Do you want to subscribe?
I do want to say though, because as we're coming to the end of this, I really enjoyed this like conversation. Emily and I chat once a month anyway on Sunday, just about our own life, like friendship life.
Yeah.
But it also a lot of times correlates into what we're doing for ourselves and where we want to go in our lives.
Yeah.
And I think like
where we're going
and what we want for real. But I think
what we want.
I think it's like really fun because this really does align with both of us. And like Emily actually sent me like, I love you. I tell you this all the time. This is the Emily I talk about like most of the time on my podcast. I'm like, my friend Emily, this is the one. Because I think that a lot of times when I've been watching you grow and you've been watching
you grow.
Right, exactly. We've been watching each other grow. And I think so often we need the support, not just coffee chat, but we need to have like these legit conversations with our friends. Because this is real life stuff that we're battling. It's not just like, oh, my baby has been sick or not sleeping, but it's like, how am I really focusing on my ego in my real life or my intuition in my real life? And how can this conversation flow into this week?
Right.
And I really enjoy like this conversation. So I just wanted to
say
like, this was totally different than what we talk about.
Yeah.
Because this was very topic based, but I definitely think this was, it was an enlightening conversation for me.
Yeah. And this is a good example. The last thing I'll leave the peeps with on here is that this is a really good example of like intuition versus ego when you spend time with people in relationships. If you leave that conversation or time spent together feeling good, feeling like your cup has been filled, feeling high vibe, that is a very clear indicator that that is a good person to be in your life or in your circle. When you leave a phone call or interaction or whatever with someone who feels like they are a vampire of energy for you, that is, even though like I have friends that are scattered all across this spectrum of whether they fill my cup or don't. If someone is an energy vampire, it's a very good, or leaves you feeling like your cup has been emptied. It's a very good
Can I remind
indicator.
you, if you have friends that are like that, I feel
I
like you're
know.
hanging on to your friends like that
Yeah.
for your ego.
It, yeah. Or it's because you feel like you quote unquote should.
Yeah. And I to myself was hanging on to something this year for my ego.
Yeah.
And my intuition kept saying, like, girl, you really need a break off. And
Yeah.
something happened in my life that it did that for me. So I want to say, if you're not following ego versus intuition, there might be a time in your life that a hard fucking punch in the face comes and it's
Yeah.
going to tell you this is your time.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good way to leave this podcast. Like, because
Yeah.
with that, friendships, jobs, family, follow what feels right to you. Right on.
Right on.
See you next week. And let me remind you that you are without a doubt a badass. I'm so grateful you're here. XOXO, your girl Mad. See you next Wednesday.